I'm Luke Kelly, and I'm the founder of the Line and Length movement, dedicated to ripping the covers off mental health stigma. After a rough spell with my mental health, I contacted a large number of mates to come together to play a game of cricket with a very unique point of difference. In between innings, a supportive platform was provided where those who felt comfortable showing some vulnerability openly spoke about their personal mental health journey. Thus, the Line and Length movement was born. While we are not mental health experts on this podcast, we are always here to support. So if you or anyone you know is feeling a bit flat, please have a talk to the experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. Today's episode is sponsored by Picker Financial Solutions. The support that Justin Picker is providing will go a long way in assisting the Line and Length movement in ripping the covers off mental health. While we here at Line and Length focus on mental health, Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial health. And now, on to this week's episode of This Is Your Line and Length.
G'day, team. It's Aiden here with This Is Your Line and Length. We've got our newest episode up. Joined here by Kels. How are you today, mate?
Yeah, I'm going really well, mate. Going real well, Aiden. And really excited here. We've got Hayley on the show. This will be great.
Our special guest today is Hayley. Hayley, how are you today?
I am fabulous and all the better for seeing you both.
Oh, it's good to hear that. That's nice to hear. You can come on again.
Yeah, whenever you'd like, Hayley. Open invite after that comment. Hayley, before we jump into it, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, like what your sort of journey has been?
Yeah, and I mean, it depends who you ask. I think whenever I get this question, it's always so hard to not answer it succinctly because to people that knew me through uni and through work, I work in advertising and have worked in advertising for the last 9 years and now run my own marketing business. For those that follow me on social media, may follow me for my weight loss journey, losing over 65 kilos over a period of 4 years. And, you know, it depends who you ask. If you ask my mum, I'm just her daughter that spends a lot of time on her phone and her laptop. So it really depends who you ask. But fundamentally, I own my own business, have worked in advertising and marketing for, 9 years, doing a lot of cool shit. And then kind of do dabble in the world of social media and content creation as well for my own brand and building that out as well.
Why don't we start a bit about the advertising world? That's kind of the, what I knew you for at uni and sort of where you branched out in after that. How did you transition from sort of the uni degree managing into like the long hours that I understand advertising has?
Yeah, look, I thought it was normal. I was like a naive, 23-year-old leaving uni being like, I'm going to be a boss bitch. Like I'm going to work any hours I need to get to the top. And, I'm really intrinsically motivated. So I kind of was like, I need to work these long hours. And it's kind of something that you don't ever get told going and starting a new role, like that you actually don't need to work all of those hours. Don't get me wrong. There's a difference between burning yourself out and putting in the work. I think there's, a point in your career that you need to go through in the early stages to say yes to everything, absorb everything that you can, take every opportunity you can, because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be where I am today and I wouldn't have the experience that I have today. But there's definitely a smarter way to go about it. And I wish somebody 9 years ago when I finished uni turned to me and goes, Hayley, you don't need to be working 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single night for 4.5 years to get to the top. So I think there's walking that fine balance. And I talk about balance a lot. I've done a couple of podcasts with other people as well, talking about balance and finding that balance, because there's never going to be the perfect equation where, you've got your work, you've got your personal life, you've got, things that are happening outside of those two bubbles that perfectly match up or perfectly weigh. And I think that balance is such a bad word to use because it implies that, they're equal. And I think that for me, it's never been about work-life balance. It's work-life integration and how, work one week may take priority over your family and your friends, and then work the following week may take a backseat because you've got things happening in your social circle or your family life that are more important. And it's about being able to manage that. And I kind of pride myself on my time management and things like that. So I kind of use that skill set to help me implement, that management in my life.
Hayley, you mentioned there you've been on previous podcasts. I doing my research, I listened to one of those during the week, and I really picked up on, you mentioned in that there's sort of a glorification around being busy.
Yeah.
Is that specifically in the advertising, world that you were working in, or is it just generally all around? Can you
I think it's everywhere. I even did it before we jumped on these podcasts. It's like, how are you? And the first response is busy. And it's like, busy is a good thing. It's like, okay, take busy out of it. And it's like, how are you as a person? You're not busy. How are you feeling? Yeah. Are you feeling good? Are you feeling confused? Are you feeling overwhelmed? I kind of set my followers a challenge a year ago. And I said, instead of answering people's question with busy, how are you? Busy? Because it's our fallback. It's our safety net.
Yeah, it is.
If we tell people that we're busy, they're going to be like, oh, she's killing it. She's so successful. And you could be crumbling underneath. And I think that telling people that you're busy is like your safety net to not have to explain that things are maybe not as good as they seem. Or, if I turn around and be like, actually, I'm shit. Like, no one wants to hear that. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people. I'm lucky I have a great, circle and close-knit group of friends and family and support network. But unfortunately, in most of today's society, if you turn around and go, oh, it's shit, people will find the quickest way to exit out of that conversation. And unfortunately, saying I'm busy is the quick way of kind of going, everything's fine. You don't need to know anything else. Let's just move on.
You're right. It is. Yeah.
Hayley, what sort of prompted you to start managing that work-life balance? Was there a breaking point, or did you just kind of realize you couldn't do it anymore?
Look, I think there's multiple points throughout my career that I can look back on and go, okay, you were probably burnt out there, or you were burnt out there, and I kind of put it down to something else. I think experience, and unfortunately that's something that you can't buy, and it's something that doesn't come in a bottle, it doesn't come with a label, and I think experience of knowing when is too much and where to draw the line in the sand, and the experience of going, actually, that can wait till tomorrow, or that can wait till Thursday. And I think, I did a lot of work with the teams that I've worked with in the past, with junior people that are coming through, because I never had somebody telling me, Hayley, you can go home at 9 o'clock. Your to-do list doesn't need to be complete at the end of every single day. You can carry things over. Like, I think, having a mentor that understands that is really important. And that's kind of the work that I do outside of all of the other things, is making sure that junior people, especially in the advertising industry, or communications industry, because unfortunately I do feel as though it's especially bad in that industry. But, just telling people that, helping them and work through their list and go, well, actually, that can wait till tomorrow. You don't need to do that tonight. And so now I use that now with my to-do lists. I've got a daily to-do list that I'll write out absolutely everything that is in my head. And I do it at the end of each day for the following day. But then every morning I go through that and go, what needs to be done by 5 o'clock today? And I highlight those things. And that's where I start with my list of things to do. And then it's like, what things can wait till tomorrow? What things can wait till the end of the week? And then that's how I prioritize my week and my days, because your to-do list is never going to be done. There is always going to be more things to be done. And I think that, unfortunately, the only thing that has taught me to manage that is experience, and is reaching out to people who have done it, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and they can help give you that advice as to how best to maintain that balance or integration.
Hayley, you mentioned there you're a list person, I gather. Do you also associate like goal setting as something that you do? Yeah,
look, goal setting for me has always been quite, I don't like a 5-year plan. I think a 5-year plan is great to have in your mind and have goals to shoot towards. But between now and your 5-year plan, there is 100,000 steps that you need to take to get there, right? And I use the example of me losing weight. I lost 65 kilos. If you told me at the start of that journey that I was setting out to lose 65 kilos, I would have laughed in your face and continued stuffing my face with Kit Kats and whatever I could get my hands on. So I think that I absolutely agree in goal setting. I don't agree in setting long-term goals. I agree in going, hey, I'd like to own a house in 5 years' time, but what are the small steps that I need to do or to implement in my daily routine or my weekly routine or my monthly routine that are helping me get to that point? Because COVID could hit, you know, the whole world shut down. And I think that, you know, there are so many curveballs everyday life can throw at you that if you have this rigid plan that you can't move from, you miss all of the other opportunities that are whizzing past you. So I definitely agree in terms of having a goal and working towards a goal. I wouldn't have lost the weight that I did. I wouldn't have my own business now if I didn't have goals and didn't set goals. But I just think that they've got to be small, short-term and realistic, because that short-term goal, when you hit that, it's so rewarding and it's so motivating. And that's the thing that's going to keep your momentum going and the consistency going. I think, you know, I set a goal my first 4 weeks of trying to lose weight. I lost 5 kilos and in 4 weeks, and I was over the moon. And I was like, right, another month, another 5 kilos. Here we go. Like, that's all I wanted to do. And I was so focused on the short-term goals that those short-term goals over time led me to lose 65 kilos.
Yeah. I'm a daily list person. And I'm also a short-term goal setting person. So I'm in primary school teacher, so I run on school terms. So each term, I'll set goals for that term. So that's sort of how I do it as well. So
totally. I think it made me laugh. Yeah, it made me laugh because my boyfriend works in hospitality, so he owns and runs cafes. And he's like, the first thing that he said to me when we first started dating, he's like, because I'm such an organizer, like I'm a planner by nature. I run events. Majority, that was my bread and butter for a large portion of my career. So I'm always forward thinking. And he's like, I need to remind you, I work in hospitality. I work 5 days ahead of where we are at the moment, and that is it. So when he organized like a birthday getaway, I was like, this for him is like hard. For him to have considered something like a month or two in advance is like somebody going way out of their way to kind of make something happen. So I think, you know, you've got to respect that people think and it depends on their industry. You know, if you come from an events background like me, you're thinking 6 months in advance and you're going, okay, next Sunday, I know it's Monday, but next Sunday we're doing this and we're going here. And then what are we going to do? And it's just like, some people aren't wired that way.
I'm getting a great insight into this as someone who just really doesn't plan anything. It's nice to kind of see the opposite side of everything here.
But that works for you. Like, I think people, you know, people can find their own groove. And I think that there's never, ever, 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 and it's the same with weight loss. It's the same with career advice. There's no one size fits all. And it's the same with managing your mental health. Like, there is no one size fits all or silver bullet that fixes everything. But there are definitely some kind of tactics that can be implemented to help kind of manage that thing or that person or that person's lives.
Sorry, Hayley. Sorry, Kels, you look like you're about to ask a question there, mate. No, Hayley, aside from burnout, were there any other pitfalls in the advertising world that you think that people should be aware of?
Yeah, look, I think there's a whole heap. I mean, I wrote an article for B&T last year of all the things that I wish I could change about the industry. And I think there are definitely things changing at the moment. One thing that, you know, resulted in me starting my own business was that, you know, a lot of agencies will talk about prioritizing people, and people are at the center of everything that they do. But newsflash, they're not. And clients and revenue are at the center of everything that people do or that those businesses do. And that for me really didn't align to the values that I have within business. And I still think that you can run a profitable and successful business or business model by prioritizing the people that you have, because fundamentally you don't have good clients, you don't have a good revenue stream, you don't have all of those things if you don't have good people and if you don't treat your people well or like human beings. So I think that's one kind of fundamental flaw that I think that there are some agencies that do it really well, and they do, you know, walk the talk, or talk the walk, whatever it is. But I think that there are a lot of agencies that kind of just tick that box as a culture thing and go, you know, I think we are people orientated, and they're not. And I think that you only have to spend time in an agency to realize that, and it'll quickly become apparent that that's one of their flaws. I think also one of the biggest things is, you know, I always laughed when people left an agency to go to another agency because they wanted more work-life balance. And it makes me laugh because it's like going, oh, I'm not going to go to that ice cream shop because that's going to make me fat, and then walk into another ice cream shop, because it's like you're going into the same industry. Like, I firmly believe, and still to this day, if you love what you do, it's not working, and you will work all the time. You'll always be thinking about work, and that's not an unhealthy thing. Like, I love what I do. I'm constantly thinking about content I can be creating for my clients. I'm constantly looking at things and going, oh, I could do this for that brand, or I could reach out to this person and do that. And I'm constantly inundated with ideas because I love what I do. And I think that people that don't love what they do will sit there and be like, oh, work-life balance is a real issue for me. And it's like, no, actually, you probably need to take a step back and go, is this the right job for me? Yeah. Because if you don't want to invest your time or take a client call at 9 o'clock in the evening because that's the only time your client can do, you don't have that passion to be in that role, and you need to be in a different career. And I think that for me has been really important. The amount of people I've told just to leave a job because they're not happy, and they're like, what should I do? Like, I get anxious when I come into work. I'm like, resign tomorrow. Yeah. And they don't want to hear it. But if you're not happy, you're not a tree. Like, you can get up and move.
Yeah, it's that old saying, love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, and I think it's very cliche, but I truly believe, like, you know, last night I was sitting up till like 1:30 just with all these ideas for this shoot today that we were doing. And it's just, I don't get mad at myself for staying up, because I'm like, that's my passion, that's my creativity, that's stuff that I can use to make great work for awesome clients. And, you know, I'll just make up for it when I get a quiet afternoon, or you know, I can maybe sleep in instead of, and go to the gym at lunchtime or things like that. So I think that, yeah, if you don't like what you do, then you will find reasons to complain about it. And it's like, you know, same as weight loss. I find the career and weight loss journeys very similar. Like, weight loss, if you say, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym, that's an excuse, right? If you shift that and go, it's not a priority of mine, that doesn't sound very good, does it? And you won't hear very many people saying that. And it's the same with work. If you are working and you get there and you're like, oh, it's 7 o'clock and I'm still working on this thing, it's like, ask yourself, did you take a 2-hour lunch break? Probably. Did you, have you prioritized your time, or have you fucked around during the day and now you're coming up with an excuse at 7 o'clock at night going as to why you're still there? And I think that if you can find negatives in something, it's the same as a relationship, it's the same as a friendship, same as everything. If you find negatives in it, most likely it's because you're looking for them and you're focusing on them, and it's because you probably don't want to be there.
Hayley, I'm just going to sort of change the subject here. You mentioned mental health just there before, and I know that late last year you wrote a really powerful online article about anxiety, and I was just wondering if we could just talk about that and you know, where that came from. Why were you inspired to write such a powerful piece of rock?
Yeah, it's funny because I write a lot. I love writing. And a fun fact about me is when I was trying to choose what I wanted to do when I went to university, I wanted to be a journalist. I love writing, but missed the cutoff and fell into advertising because I had the same first year subjects. And I was like, okay, cool, we can do this, and I'll transfer after my first year. And then ended up loving advertising because it had that creative outlet of writing. And even though I'm a creative person, I'm very much kind of client management side at the moment, but definitely with that creative tendencies. That letter I wrote just as part of a journal that I write on my laptop, and 90% of it is really shit and I'd probably never show anybody, and 10% of it can actually help others understand. And I think I was feeling really frustrated because there was a huge stigma around having anxiety, and you didn't want to admit that you were anxious. And I didn't want to admit that I was anxious. I would name it or label it a whole heap of other things, like, oh, I'm just an overthinker, that's who I am by nature. Or, you know, or it was a really bad relationship and that's what brought it out in me, and those kinds of things. So I think it's easy to label it something else, but when I started to articulate it, and in that letter, I'm very clear about the fact that you can be successful and still an anxious person. You can be creative and still anxious. You can be introverted or extroverted and still anxious. And I think that for me is really important to articulate, because there is a difference in what people think an anxious person looks like versus what anxious people actually look like. And the funny thing about that is I actually wrote it 5 years earlier, but didn't share it with anyone and hadn't ever planned on sharing it with anyone. The only person that I shared it with was my mum at the time. And it's actually really funny when I look back on it, because mum then turned around and was like, at the end of it, she goes, oh, are you sure it's anxiety? Because she's never grown up around people with mental health issues. She's never had friends with mental health issues. She's never had family members with mental health issues. And I think it's really hard for that generation or that era to admit that there are people coming forward with these things that typically, like, my mum showed me a medical book. She's a nurse. She showed me a medical book from the 1960s or 1950s, and it's the definitions of all these like various like illnesses, sicknesses, things like that. In the 1950s, depression was there, and the recommended treatment for it was to just put somebody to sleep.
Oh, you're kidding.
Right? So it's like, if you think about, that's the era that we're dealing with. There are parents, like, you know, there was always this stigma to shut it down, to not talk about it, and it's a weakness. And no wonder, you know, we have men and women not wanting to talk about it, because that's our parents' generation, you know. And I think that it's so important for our generation to break that stigma. And that's what I wanted to do with this letter. Was I was actually asked at work, as part of an initiative that I was running called Mental Health Awareness Month. We were doing a mental health awareness series with all of the leaders across the agency group talking, and I interviewed each of them about mental health, because I just don't think that people naturally talk about it unless they're point blank asked about it. And it was really interesting to see all of those things come out. But as part of that, our external PR team were like, hey, does anyone have any stories or want to write something or anything like that? And I said, look, I've got this letter that I wrote. And I said, look, I'll give it to you. And if you think it's going to help somebody, or if you think somebody will read it and go, wow, that's exactly what I'm feeling, like, feel free to share it with whoever. And then they read it and they were like, we can't not share this. Like, why have you been sitting on this for 5 years? Like, the amount of people that reached out to me after that saying, your letter so clearly articulated everything that I feel on like a daily or a weekly basis. And it's just to remind people that, you know, it doesn't define you. And I think that, you know, a lot of people would look at me and be like, you don't have any mental health symptoms, or, you know, you don't look like an anxious person. And that's because I don't let it define me. I think that there are so many other things that can define who I am. I'll always be anxious. I'm a little anxious rat at most times. But I think that, that letter was shared with the intention that if it can help one person or a bunch of people, then I'd be better off sharing it.
How did you sort of feel going into releasing it? So were you worried? Were you nervous about releasing it, or were you sort of like, were you keen? And then also, what was that feeling like once it was out there?
Yeah, I think it was like I was nervous. I think mainly because I've always struggled with saying that I feel anxious about certain things, or I'd never admit. I would always be kind of like I'd cover up the fact that I was being overworked or burnt out, because I didn't want people to think that I wasn't capable. And it's the same with the mental health thing, is that I didn't want to say, yeah, I'm an anxious person, and then somebody look at me and go, oh, we can't hire her because she wouldn't perform at her best because she struggles with this. And I think that as somebody and as a woman, and I hate to pull a woman card, but as a woman that has been told that she can't have a job because she's not a man before, I think that I immediately think that I avoid anything that will potentially hinder me getting a role, or, you know, climbing the corporate ladder, or like succeeding in any way. And I think that that's why it's really important for me to just kind of keep all of those things to myself, keep this facade up that I'm successful and I'm good at what I do and I'm smiley and there's no problem. But I think that when I dive deeper into that, it's like, well, what is that teaching our future generations, and what is that teaching my teams and my junior teams that I used to work with? And, you know, I would want somebody to come to me if they were experiencing any of these symptoms and, you know, any mental health questions, anything, even if they're broken up with their girlfriend, come and talk to me. Like I opened that conversation with my teams, because, you know, it's so important to just have that open line of communication with senior people in the business. And that's what kind of then made me feel more comfortable about sharing it, in the sense that, you know, there's no one really that can say anything negative about it. And I think that 5 years ago, if I had done it, I probably would have received a little bit less support. And I hate to say that, but it's the same. Like, you know, 5 years ago, if I'd called into work sick and said, hey, I'm just not having a good day today, like, I'm not sick, but like, I don't want to get out of bed, I'm feeling anxious, my chest is heavy, and I don't want to face clients today, my boss would have asked me for a sick certificate, right, from the doctor. But if I call into work now, well, I work for myself, so great. But I think that if I called into a work like place now and said, hey, I'm really not having a good day, like mentally I'm struggling, 99% of leaders and senior business leaders would understand that, and they would not even ask for a, you know, sick certificate or anything like that. I think that, you know, the conversation now is being so much more opened up, and I love that, and I'm so part of that, and I'm happy to be a facilitator in that. But I think that the reason that I felt more comfortable sharing that story now is because not only did I have a kind of safe and sound like support network, but it was the right time to do it and the right environment for it, where it was received with open arms, instead of people kind of rolling their eyes and being like, oh, there's another girl talking about her mental health issues.
It sounds like it's sort of a liberating feeling for you.
It was. And I think the most liberating thing was the amount of people that then reached out to me via social media, LinkedIn. Some people emailed me, God knows how they got my email address, but like, you know, they all reached out and they were just like, I can't thank you enough for sharing this. Like, I sent this to my mum to articulate how I feel, like, and that for me is just, you know, I've always been about helping people, like whether it's in business or personally. I think that fundamentally I just want to help people, and I think that if that can open the conversation for somebody else that I really struggled to have for many years, then it's a win-win.
Hayley, what does anxiety look like for you? Like what does you know, when you get a bad, say, an anxiety attack or something like that, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great question. I think that for a lot of people, and you know, that don't experience anxiety, people think that you have panic attacks, and you can, absolutely. I've been there. But for me, mainly when I experience anxiety, I become quite reserved and I become very introverted. I live in my head. It's not a great place to be when you're going through that kind of moment. And I kind of just close off. And it can be for 30 seconds. It can be for, a couple of hours. It can be for a day or two. It just depends on what has kind of set me off. But I think that for me, when anxiety kind of hits, I kind of go quite quiet, which is polar opposite of how I am normally. So it's quite obvious. I usually, I kind of retract from the world and kind of go into my little turtle shell and just keep to myself fundamentally. I think I've only really had like 2 or 3 big panic attacks in my years of living. And I think now I'm able to identify when that feeling starts to come, and then I'm able to kind of manage it appropriately as and when it arises, which is nice.
Speaking of managing,
when you say, when you say, I think we're about to ask the same question here, Aiden. What does managing it look like with you?
Yeah, look, I think it depends what has triggered it, and it depends what has caused it. In terms of, one of my biggest pieces of advice that I give to anybody everyone that will listen is that it's really important to have a mental health plan planned when you're feeling good. And it sounds like the dumbest thing in the world, but if you're feeling great and you go, hey, if on the off chance I ever experience a day where I don't want to talk to anybody and I'm feeling really down and I don't want to let it affect my family or my relationships or anything like that, what am I going to do? And I think that it can be really simple. It can be like a 1-step plan. It doesn't have to be like a Bible of like what to do when you're experiencing that feeling. But I think that it's one thing that I always kind of say to people that have come to me asking for advice in terms of how I manage it, is having that kind of action plan of how to manage it and how to approach it. And for me, if I'm on technology like computer or my phone and that's the thing that has caused it, I step away from technology and I disconnect myself from technology. I get outside. Nature, it's scientifically proven that nature has a great way to ground us. And just sitting outside, especially if it's a windy day or if it's a fresh day, there's nothing more kind of grounding than going outside. And usually I'll either do, if I'm at work, I'll do a lap of the block of wherever I am. I normally try and walk outside for phone calls and things like that anyway, to kind of break up my day, because sometimes when you're in kind of the 4 walls of a room or an office or things like that, it can seem quite claustrophobic. Deep breaths for me is a big thing, like breathing. I think that far too often you don't realize how much your breath impacts how you feel or your mood. And for a very long time, I just thought it was a really wanky way to meditate or whatever. And I was just like, oh yeah, breath work, cool. Like you do you, I'll do me. But deep breaths and really controlling my breathing has been something that's really changed the game for me, because it's something that I can do quite covertly. Like it's not something that, I need to make a big song and dance about. I can sit at my desk and do it if I needed to. And then kind of coming out of that in terms of lifting my mood or changing my mood, I use music hugely. I'm known to pump music in my tune, like in my ears or in the office or in my house, like whatever it is, I'll just turn it up nice and loud. And then reaching out to somebody if it's got to that point where I can't resolve it myself, is reaching out to, one of my close friends or speaking to my boyfriend or my mum and dad about it. And then, fundamentally it's finding a way to do something for myself that makes me feel good. So whether that's going to the gym or going for a walk with a friend or, meeting someone up for dinner or something like that, really helps me to kind of snap out of that kind of day and kind of end the day on a high, which, is really important to me, because it's just a day. Like it comes, it goes, and there's a new one the next day. So I think that, you know, breaking it down into those 24-hour periods is that, you know, that feeling will last, and it may last longer than 24 hours, but there's another 24 hours after that that you can, you know, pick up and have a crack at making a better day.
Hayley, how many different things did you try before you sort of got that set of things that work for you?
Everything. And it's the same as weight loss, can I tell you? Like, I have tried diet pills, I've tried the shake diet, I have tried everything. So when people come to me about weight loss advice, I was like, just do something that you like and do it for a long period of time, right? Like, that's all you need to do. Don't eat like a dickhead, and do some form of exercise that you enjoy, and you will lose weight. Mental health, same. You know, you read these books, I hated, I avoided meditating like the plague, because I can't sit still for longer than, you know, 5 minutes without feeling fidgety. And I think that meditation for me has kind of always been like that devil sitting on my shoulder, being like, I know that it's good for me and I know that it's going to help me, but I just can't. So I think for me, my way of meditating is going for long walks and just zoning out completely, doing a spin class where I can't think about anything other than what's in front of me in terms of the spin class. I think I tried hundreds of things. I've tried journaling, getting up early and journaling, and I'm like, I spend 90% of my day on the computer. Like, I don't want to continue writing in my downtime. Like, even though I love writing, that didn't work for me. I think, there's so many things that I tried. And I think, like I said before, there's no silver bullet. There's no, you know, one size fits all for figuring out what works. But you do need to try it all, and try anything. Like, if someone tells you that, you know, I found for a really long time, you know, going for a swim changed me, like made me an entirely new person. Like, it's soul restoring. It, you know, wipes away anything that may have happened that day or the night before or whatever. And you literally jump into the ocean and you feel like a new person. So I literally did that all of like winter. I'd go swimming, and it made me feel so good. And yes, I was in there very briefly, but those kinds of things, you know, I tried ice baths. I tried, there's this cold water bucket technique that boxers do. And it was 2 buckets of cold water over the head morning and night. So the first thing that you do in the morning, last thing you do at night. And it's a thing that they kind of do to decrease their flinch kind of reaction, and kind of build resilience. And I did that for like 9 months, 10 months, morning and night, just seeing if it would help. But anxiety still hits. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is that you can find something that works for you. Like, I know getting outside, listening to loud music, deep breaths, stepping away from my technology, they're all the things that can help me, but it doesn't stop anxiety from coming. And it's like, a Band-Aid can help you with your cut finger, but it doesn't stop you from cutting your finger.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important to understand, is that I will always live with anxiety. It's not something that I am ever going to rid myself of, but I can learn to manage it, and I can learn to integrate it into my life. And it can just be like my little sidekick that we take on the world with, because it's always going to be there. I'm not ever going to get rid of it. And I think the sooner that people can come to terms with the fact that mental health doesn't go away, it's not something that you just erase out of you as a person. And I think that, you know, we're not trying to fix it, we're trying to manage it and find the best way to manage it. And if that's going for a swim every morning, if that's going for long walks, like whatever you need to do to manage it, is something that needs to be implemented into your daily routine.
That's such great advice, Hayley, to hear. Like, you just need to manage it, and everyone's strategies are going to be different. But I think, you know, something we like to do on this podcast is, you know, give a platform to people to share what strategies work for them, and just embrace all those, embrace people's different strategies. That's what it's all about.
I like how you put a really positive spin on it. You said that, you know, anxiety is always going to be there, and it's just going to be the sidekick that you go through life with. Like, it's a really cool way of kind of, you know, I've always got this with me and we're going to get through it together. And unfortunately, it's always going to be there. But hey, I'm still going to tackle the world and go for it. I think it's a really nice way to look at it.
It's literally one of the first things I said to my boyfriend. I was like, when he asked me, like, he was like, look, I think that there should be like a this should be a more formal thing. I was like, look, I come with a +1 and it's anxiety. I'm working through it. Like, there are things that I, overthink, and there are things that I process differently, but if you can work with me on that, we're good. And it's literally one of the first things I said. So it's like a buy one, get one free deal. But I think that anxiety, although there are so many negative connotations to it, a big part of my anxiety is overthinking. And that makes me great at my job. Like, I'm an event planner. I plan content. You bet your bottom dollar that when I'm planning an event for you, I've considered options B, C, D, E, F, and G. Because I have overthought every single possible thing that could go wrong with this event, and I've got a plan for it. So I think that there's so many things that people can go, oh, these are all the bad things about anxiety. But, if I didn't have anxiety and I didn't overthink chronically, I wouldn't be as good as I am at my job. So I think that there is always positives to everything. And I'm not just one of those people that's, outwardly positive and then goes home and cries for hours. But I think that there's always a positive to something, and it's about finding those positives with it. I once joked that I'd own a business called the Anxious Event Planner, because it's what makes me good. Like, I'd rather someone overthink my event than underthink it. And I think that, it's a point of difference. So I think that just go embrace it and wear it like a proud badge.
It's absolutely awesome to see, Hayley. You've spoken about your weight loss journey on here, and I'm imagining that everyone listening also wants to hear about it. So I guess let's start from the beginning. What prompted all of it?
Yeah, well, what prompted the weight gain? We can start with that. I suppose you got to start somewhere, right? So I've always been fit, healthy all through high school, played sports, played touch football, water polo. I did Ironwoman on the beach, all of those things. And then I had a few bad injuries in year 12 or year 11. And then I moved away to uni in Bathurst, where we all know each other from.
That's right.
Fabulous. And Bathurst is not the most welcoming environment when it comes to the kilos. I think that, I think people are saying the fresher 15.
The fresher 15.
In your first year. So I think that, I don't blame uni. I blame moving away from home. I blame the fact that, my mum's sitting there being like, you can't eat biscuits at 3:00. And I'm like, says who? Like, I think that, it's the newfound freedom. It's about wanting to fit in and wanting to go out and party with your new friends that you now live with 24/7. And you're like, this is so surreal. Like, I live with like 30 of the coolest people, and there's like 200 other people that are like the same age as me, all similar mindsets in the sense that they wanted to be in Bathurst for uni. Like, I just think that it's a really cool space to be in, but it's also something that you can get very easily caught up in. And for me, I kind of let go of all the things that were really important to me when I started university just to fit in. So, I wasn't going to the gym. I didn't join a sports team because none of my other friends were doing it, or it wasn't a cool thing to do. If I was a boy, then I would have been great playing rugby, then I would have fit right in. But I think that, it wasn't a cool thing for girls to do there. So I think that, I think my last year I joined the rugby team, which was awesome, and I fucking loved it. But I think that, I think it was me letting go of all the things that I loved and all the things that made me me, where I then kind of piled on the pounds or the kilos. And I got to a point where I was 65 kilos heavier than I am now, which is terrifying. The trigger for me to start losing the weight was two things. There's a lot of articles saying that, my boyfriend called me fat and that's how I lost the weight. And yes, we had an argument in the heat of the moment. He turned around and said, lose some weight, you fat bitch, which, can I say, has stuck with me. And whenever I feel like giving up, I hear that tiny little voice in my head. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to prove you wrong, because I like proving people wrong. And there's that. But I also, I'm not a big TV watcher. Like, I rarely watch TV. And my family was watching The Biggest Loser. And it was like the first episode where they all like weigh in. And there was this young girl who was a couple of years older than me at the time, and she weighed in and weighed less than I did at the time. And I was like, okay, so there is a show for fat people to lose weight. And I weigh more than the fat people on the fat person show. And this is an issue. Like, I need to do something about it. And that was my kind of wake up call to be like, what the fuck are you doing, Hayley? Like, and that's where I did. For the first 6 months, I tried everything. I tried diet pills. I tried cutting out carbs, cutting out sugar, cutting out coffee, cutting out dairy because that may help. I tried everything. And then I was like, okay, I'll join a gym. I hid in spin classes for like 8 months. I literally was like, this is perfect. The room is dark. Nobody can see me. I can come in, lose my shit to the music for an hour and then leave, and nobody watches me. And I think that was a big thing for me, is that I had so little self-confidence to walk into a gym and just start training, even though I've done my Cert 3 and 4 in personal training. I know what to do in the gym. You know, all of those things. I had all these tools, but I just didn't have the self-confidence to do it. So I hid in spin classes. I set short monthly goals. So every month, I always say, don't reward yourself with food. You're not a dog. Because I would be like, oh, how great, I've lost 5 kilos, and I'd be like, now I'm going to treat myself to some food. And it's just like, it's so unhealthy. And instead I shifted that to every 4 weeks, if I had got the goal that I had set for myself, I'd buy myself a new piece of like activewear or like runners or whatever that then kind of motivated me for the next month. And for the first few months, it was just to lose 5 kilos a month or a couple of kilos a month. And I kind of just kept on going. Now I lost like 25 kilos, and I was like, I'm happy at this weight, which also makes me laugh now, because I'm like, okay, well, I'm now like another 35 kilos lighter than that, but I was happy at the 25 kilos lost. And then I think it's just about finding the things that you enjoy. I love boxing. I love going to spin classes still. That's my like bread and butter. I love going to the gym with people. I love walking. I love being active. So I think you've got to find something that you love. Otherwise, you will not continue to do it. And I think for me, the biggest thing is consistency. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you consistently eat like a dickhead, you are going to gain weight. If you consistently go for walks every single day, the likelihood of that impacting your weight is very high. Like, I think that, the more you do something, the better that you're going to get at it. So whether it's eating or training or whatever, there's always going to be those long-term impacts by doing something consistently.
Hayley, we mentioned the Fresher 15 that we all put on at uni there, and for me, it's alcohol. All right, so if I look at 6 beers and I wear them, like alcohol just puts weight on me. In terms of you, do you attribute your weight gain with alcohol as well? And also now in keeping fit, how many times would you drink per week? And what do you do to, are you calorie counting? What's it look like there? Because I believe, like, I personally can control my diet, what food I put in, but alcohol seems to just make me blow out. So I have to limit how much I drink.
Totally. And I think that so many people are like, oh, I'm so good with my food. And then they go and get absolutely blind on the weekend and have like 5 bottles of wine. And you're just like, you've literally just had your week's worth of calories in 2 bottles of wine. Like, wild. Now for me, it's a lot more of a flexible approach. I do count my calories just because I like the foresight. It's more of an educational thing for me. So being able to put something that I know a lot of calorie content. So my friends always joke with me being like, if we're out for at a breakfast or lunch or dinner, they'll be like, you'd be able to tell me how much this is, because there's a lot of things that through calorie counting, it's kind of taught me the nutritional value of foods. I do like putting things in and tracking it because it keeps me accountable. And the likelihood of me putting in a biscuit, like I made Anzac cookies the other day, and the likelihood of me eating a biscuit and then having to put it in my tracker are really slim. So I'm like, if I know that there's that accountability there, when I used to train people, I used to get them to write down for the first week of training with me everything that they put in their mouth. I'm not going to put you on a diet. I just want you to write everything that you eat and drink and put it in a food diary, because food diaries are the biggest deterrent. If you've got to write you ate half Tim Tams, like you're not gonna eat them. So for me, Yes, I track my calories. I'm not strict with them. What I do is I look at my calories over a week. If I know that I've got a Friday and a Saturday night out with, my girlfriends or my boyfriend or whatever, I bank calories up over the course of the week. So if I'm sitting on 2,000 calories every day over the span of 7 days, if I know that I'm going to go over that 2,000 calories on the Friday and the Saturday, I take a couple of hundred calories off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and give them to Friday and Saturday, so that over the course of the week, I'm still consuming the same amount of calories. I think for me, the biggest thing is, I love a red wine. Like I love a glass of red wine. I had one with my mum at lunch today. But I think that it's just like, my biggest thing is just like, don't eat like a dickhead. Like if you're sitting there and you're like 5 days in of having KFC, like wake up to yourself. Like I think it's about being really honest with where you're at and, eating intuitively. So, I fast most mornings. If I'm honest with you, I don't eat just because I don't feel like it. I fast for 16 hours usually. So from my last meal in the evening, because I love my dinner, till the next day. And I usually don't eat till about midday. So today, for example, I got up, I had a shoot that I had from 7 o'clock this morning. I shot all day today till 12:30. Then I only had a black coffee in that period of time and just water, and then went to the gym after the shoot, and then had my lunch after the gym, and I had pasta and meatballs, which is delicious. And then I, go out I had a PR event this afternoon, and I met my mum, we had a glass of wine, and then I'm due to have dinner after this. So I think, you can eat what you want, just don't eat like a dickhead. I think that, I'm more than happy to give somebody real and actual advice when they tell me, I'm drinking 6 nights a week, and I'm like, well, it's really interesting. I had one client that I was training a few years back, and he came to me. His diet was really good. His week of eating, really great. Like, could not fault it. But he had a bottle of Coke, full sugar Coke, like the 1.5 litre Coke, not like a 600 ml Coke, like 1.5 ml Cokes every day. And he'd polish off a case of beer a week.
Yeah, right.
So I said to him, you continue eating what you're eating, but no Coke, no beers. And then you come back to me in 4 weeks' time. I'm not going to train you until then, because he was severely overweight. He came back to me in 4 weeks' time and he'd lost 45 kilos.
Hey, really?
Just by cutting out the liquid. So it's like, I always pose the question, it's like, would you rather drink your calories or would you rather eat them? And I know what my answer is. Don't get me wrong, there are days that I would rather drink them. We're human. There are really long periods that I can go without drinking and I don't need to drink. I think the biggest stigma, I've seen more and more men quit drinking in the last 12 months than I have ever before. And namely because of how it makes them feel. Alcohol is a depressant.
That's right.
There's no way to beat around the bush when it comes to that. And I think that if it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, don't drink it. Like I did, I think like 9-10 months without alcohol. And I was very proud of myself that I would go into a pub and order a soda water and freshly squeezed lime in a short glass so that people thought that I was drinking vodka soda limes. And I did that for 9 months and no one asked me a single thing. As soon as you go, I'm not drinking, people are like, oh, are you pregnant? Are you okay? What's wrong? Why aren't you drinking? Whereas if you just go, no, I'll have a soda water and lime. I went to a wedding recently. Soda water and lime, didn't drink. I drove. And no one asked. So I just think the biggest thing is what people's perceptions are of non-drinkers. So if you can beat around that whole, not drinking conversation and just kind of fake your way through it, then I think you're better off for it. No one asks otherwise. Like, I think if you can hold a conversation with people that are drunk, the worst part is about being sober in a bunch of people that are absolutely off their face. And you're like, is that what I'm like?
That just reminds me of one of our mates up at uni, Lippo. He didn't drink at all, and he was
Yeah,
always
flipper.
always there till like the last. He was one of the last guys to leave. He always had so much fun,
Yeah.
but he had to put up with all of us when we're absolutely hammered at uni parties.
Yeah.
I don't get
Well,
how.
it's one of the reasons I took a job at uni bar, because I could be behind the bar serving all my friends, being around all of my friends, but not having to drink a single thing, and be there until the last person walked out of uni bar and like hurried them out so that I could go home. But I love that, because I'm like, I love being out, I love socializing, but I didn't necessarily always like the drinking. So I think drinking is fine. I think I always include my drinking in my calorie counting. If I know that I'm going to have a couple of big lunches or dinners or anything like that, I bank my calories. But I just think that, you know, if you don't count calories, the best way to do it is go, okay, what am I doing at the moment? If I'm drinking 3 nights a week, let's limit it to 1 night a week. And then I'm going to choose which night a week I'm choosing to drink. And it kind of makes you think, or, you know, question it a little bit further. And I just don't think that people interrogate their decisions enough themselves.
Hayley, you said sort of at the beginning there were news articles written about yourself, particularly about what your boyfriend had said to you to start you on your weight loss journey. You've also turned your journey into like a pretty awesome sort of social media, I guess, campaign, for lack of a better term. How did that come about?
The social media side of it.
Yeah.
Look, I started my Instagram as, I started Instagram like any normal human, just to explore a new platform other than Facebook. I think that I started posting more fitness related stuff when I wanted to hold myself accountable. And I was like, if I put it up here, people are going to ask me why I deleted it if I didn't stick to it. So I think that it was a good way to hold myself accountable when I didn't have people or like-minded people in my immediate circle that could hold me accountable. And then one day I had a journalist reach out to me saying that could she interview me about my weight loss transformation. And I said, absolutely. I'd love to share my story, and I'd love to see, again, if it can help anybody, or, you know, give the advice that I needed to hear 5 years ago, as in, you know, diet pills don't work, then great, I'll share my story. So I sat down with her. It was a great interview. It was literally one line in the conversation. The conversation went for about an hour and a half. One line in the conversation around my boyfriend calling me fat, and the name of the article that came out, Revenge Body. And I'm like, oh God, like, okay, cool. And I now know how that industry works. I didn't at the time, but I now know how it works. You know, and then from there, that one article, I literally went to bed. So I did the interview at like 4 o'clock that afternoon. And she's like, oh, it'll be kind of done in the next 24 hours. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, do I get to see it before it goes out? And she's like, oh, I'll just send you a link. And I was like, okay, cool. She sent me the live link when it went live.
Thanks.
And then, so I woke up at like 7 a.m. to this journalist sending me a link saying, oh, this has gone live like 30 seconds ago. I was like, fuck, the speed reading through it all. And literally within 24 hours, my Instagram blew up. I had people messaging me from Poland, from Africa, from the UK, saying that I'm all over the front page news there about my revenge body, you know, crazy. Like, I have never seen, like, they say news travels fast, but I just didn't think that that was newsworthy. I was like, surely there's far more important things that we can be talking about other than me. But yeah, that kind of happened. And since then, I've kind of had a kind of subsequent growing and kind of engaged audience, I suppose, that are interested in, you know, what I am doing, and, you know, what I am eating, and when I'm training, and what I'm training, and why I'm training, and those kinds of things. And it's wild. Like, the community that I have are loyal as fuck. And they, like, when I go missing for 24 hours on Instagram, the amount of messages I get that are like, Hayley, is everything okay? You haven't posted a story today. Like, I just wanted to check in on you. Like, just wanted to check that everything was okay. Like, wild, like, amazing, but wild. Mind-boggling to think that strangers that you've never met before are like so invested in you and your brand and your platform, and just your story, which it's still a bit weird for me. And, you know, when I open my question boxes up on my stories, I get people being like, I love your content, I love what you do, and all these compliments. And I become like this awkward turtle when compliments are given to me, because I'm like, great. And I'm learning to accept them, but I'm like, oh, thank you, like, weird, like, cool, okay, no problems, next story. Like, it's just weird. I think it's weird that people, you know, I have people message me being like, I saw you in the shops today, like, I didn't want to come over and say hi, like, I wanted to get a picture. And I was like, weird, like, weird. Like, I've never been a fangirl of anybody. Like, I never grew up with like band posters on my wall or anything like that. So I just really struggle to understand that kind of mentality, but I love it.
Do you sort of look at your Instagram, do you regard it as work or do you regard it as play, or is it a bit of both?
Interesting. Great question. I think that I regard it as my own platform. I regard it as a combination of what I do day to day. I regard it as me in a digital format. I think you see my highs and my lows on my story. I post, you know, non-filtered pictures, I post filtered pictures, I post photo shoots, you know, photos. I also post pictures of me coming out after an operation or ripping my toenail off, which I did last week, which is great. So I think that, you know, I think the biggest thing for me is keeping it real. I post, you know, I always think that if I had a 5-year-old daughter or a 10-year-old daughter or a son for that matter, I'd post what I want those people looking at. You know, I want to set a good example. I want to share things that may help people, whether that's with business or with their personal lives. And that's why when I started my separate business page, it was a big question over whether I post the stuff that I'm doing for work on my personal page or have its own page. And I think for me, my work page is really around everything that I do for work, because there is so much content that we create that just may not interest people on my platform. If they are interested in it, I've had a lot of people go over and follow that page, and that's great. I do a lot of business advice and things like that on that platform, and pieces of advice that I've learned along the way and things like that. So it's not just a platform to showcase me and my business and the work that we do, but it's a platform to help. And I think that that's something that has always kind of been fundamentally like the grounds or the kind of foundation of what I do is whatever I'm doing, it's with an intent to help. So my platform personally is a combination of me, and I think the biggest compliment I have ever received is a woman coming up to me being like, you look exactly like you do on your Instagram. And I was like, how is that a compliment today? Like, I just like blown away by the fact that, you know, there are so many filters, there are so many face tunes, there are apps that replace your face with somebody else's face and it looks seamless, and it's mental. And I've played with them. I love playing with them because they look so fucking ridiculous. And I'd never use them just because I don't like setting that example. It doesn't help anybody.
On the flip side of social media, you said sort of the compliments and stuff that you get. How do you deal with the haters?
Oh, we love the haters. Haters drive me. Haters motivate me. I love it. I'm, you know what? I kind of sometimes I say I would prefer that haters come to me than somebody that can't deal with it, because I can deal with it and I can digest it. I think I first experienced haters with the first article that went live about my weight loss journey, and there were hundreds of thousands of comments being like, you know, oh, she still looks shit, or look at her. Like, it was just like there was a balance of like, oh, well, her boyfriend did her a favor by calling her fat because look at her now. And then there was other ones being like, or she still looks like shit, she doesn't look like she's lost any weight, blah, blah, blah. Like, anyway. And I love it because I'm like, you know what? These people, I think it's an internal job. I don't think it's something, you can't change those people. Those people will never stop. I think there's a line in the sand to be drawn when it comes to trolling. I think there are the petty little trolls that sit in their little dungeons and write these nasty little comments, which cool, because they've got nothing better to do. And they're petty. You know, it's water off a duck's back. I think where we draw the line is, you know, threatening people's family, threatening people's loved ones, friends, you know, telling people to kill themselves. Like, that is awful.
Yeah,
and you know, the platforms, you know, Erin Molan's doing a great job at lobbying for that at the moment, around, you know, getting some real laws around what people can and can't say on social media. Because I think one of the biggest things is, you know, you hear is like, oh, well, if you don't want to be trolled, you shouldn't be on social media. I'm like, no, those people telling you to go and kill yourself shouldn't be on social media. Like,
yeah,
I think that there's a big job that still needs to be done for that. But in terms of dealing with the haters, I think that you need to be really self-confident, to be able to just digest it and go, okay, you're a little troll that sits in a little cave and you're really unhappy with your little life. And that's okay, because I'm happy with mine and I really like mine and I'm going to continue sharing mine. I think the biggest thing that makes me laugh is when people comment on, you know, my page and they're following me and they're like, this is disgusting, you look disgusting. And I'm like, you follow me. Like,
yeah.
you clicked that little blue button at the top of my page that says follow.
Yeah.
You can click it again and it will unfollow me. Like, I just feel like, you know, these people that get so caught up in drama, you're just like, you know, if you invested all that time trolling somebody into working on yourself, you'd be a better person. You'd probably be outside, not in your little cave. So I think that I'm lucky that I've built my resilience up. I'm lucky that, you know, I've got an amazing, you know, support network around me that I feel safe enough to kind of go, well, he's a idiot. You know, I did that YouTube series a few weeks ago, and if you read any of those comments, it's I mean, my favorite one was like, you still look like a weasel, and I just couldn't stop laughing. I was just like, I don't even know what a weasel looks like, but I find this hilarious. So I think that, you know, haters, you can choose how you react to something, right? Like, you can't choose what happens to you. You know, we can't live in a cotton wool ball our whole lives. There's always going to be awful people anywhere we go, whether that's a workplace, whether that's a relationship, whether that's a friendship. You're always going to experience these people. And I think that we can't teach our kids or generations to come to just kind of not be exposed to it, but we can teach them how to deal with it and how to be a bigger person and, you know, move on from it and, you know, use it to motivate them. I think, you know, it's like my ex's first comment, you know, lose some weight. It's like, okay, watch me, like, stand back and watch me. And I think that that's really important to teach our younger generations, is how to deal with it, and that you can control how you react to it. You may not be able to control what people say to you. You may not be able to control, you know, things that are thrown your way or curveballs that are thrown into your life, but you can control how you react to it. And 90% of the time I just laugh at it. A lot of the times I screenshot it when I send it to my friends. I think it's really funny. But I think that, yeah, there's a line in the sand. You know, there's this petty trolling, but I think that, you know, it becomes really destructive, and can really beat a person down when somebody is so repetitively talking down or, you know, repeating something so much that you then start to believe it's true. And that's kind of something that I'm, you know, very conscious about. I'll block people. You know, if I block you, like, I can't expect people to unfollow me, that's fine, but I'll block you. Like, you won't see my stories, you won't see my content, that's cool. See you later.
That's so great to hear that you use it as motivation. You use the hate as motivation. That's really, really powerful. And I think, you know, a message that a lot of people could take from that.
Well, yeah, I think that, you know, with anything in life, I think, you know, if you get told by a boss that you can't take that role because you've not got enough experience or you've not done X, Y, and Z, you know, use that as a motivation to go on and open your own business, you know, start your own thing. Like, I think, you know, that's why I'm where I am now. Like, there are so many roadblocks, there are so many obstacles that I've come up against in my life and my career that I've just gone, you know what, why can't I do this on my own? Like, why can't I run a successful business that is centered around people, where we still do cool shit, we still make a fuckload of money and everyone's happy? Like, it can exist. And I'm here to sit there and go to all those, you know, bosses and managing directors and people that I've worked with in the past, that it can fucking exist. Like, don't sit there being like, oh, money's really tight, I can't pay you what you deserve. Like, no, like, treat people with the respect, treat people like humans, and everyone wins. And I think that that rule of kind of taking the hate as motivation can be applied in anything that you do. You know, any setback that you have, you know, my toe, prime example, last Sunday, ripped my toenail off. Not expected, all the way down my toe, had to go in for emergency surgery on the Monday. And you know, I could easily sit there and be like, oh, well, fuck, I can't do anything. Like, I can't walk on it. I can't go to the gym and do any exercise. I can't do X, Y, Z. You know, it's easy to focus on the things that you can't do. But instead, I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And I sat on, I don't even know what to call it. And it's a very inappropriate term, but I'm like, you know, that bike, the hand bike?
Yeah.
Yeah, that bike. I was like, I've sat on that for the last 4 days for an hour and then just pumped it through and then got on from it. It's just like, you know, focus on the things you can do. If you get so caught up focusing on the things that you can't do, you will miss so many opportunities that come flying past you.
Hayley, I've got a bit of a question for you. What if you could give yourself from, let's say, when you're 18, if you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, what would I tell myself? I'd tell myself to back myself more.
Oh, I like that.
I think that, especially, again, you know, in my experience, boys are a lot more self-confident. You know, you have a junior male in an accounting gig, an advertising gig, and he's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I've been in this job for 12 months, but I'm fucking on top of my game. Like, I am killing it, right? Compare that to a girl going into the advertising industry. You don't have that same caliber of confidence. And I think that the one thing that I would tell 18-year-old Hayley is to back myself a little bit more and stick to my guns and stick to my values a lot more, because I think if I stuck to my values and back to myself, I wouldn't have gained weight in the first place. I think if I had stuck to my guns and stuck to my values and back to myself, I probably would have opened my own business 5 years ago. And I think that, yeah, there's a lot to be said in just backing yourself. You won't always have a supportive network around you. You won't always have, you know, the people telling you that you should go and do something. Like, you know, when I started my business now, mum was like, oh, but, you know, you're like 2 years away from long service leave. I'm like, oh, like, I would rather go on holiday for 2 years. Like, I'd rather spend the next 2 years working on my own business than working for a complete idiot who doesn't respect me and who doesn't pay me what I'm worth, then spend another 2 years so that I can get long service leave. So I think that, you know, I think there's so many people that have an opinion about absolutely everything. I always laugh. My boyfriend runs cafes, and as soon as he goes, he's going to open a new one, everyone has an opinion about what the perfect cafe looks like, and they're like, oh, you should do this, or you should do this, and you should do this. And he's like, if I listen to everybody, my cafe would look like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think you listen and absorb everything that goes on in your own world, like, you would be so far away from where you need to be. And I think that it's really important to back yourself and to continue backing yourself. And it's especially the hardest to back yourself when you're experiencing that doubt yourself. But yeah, I think if I had backed myself a little bit more, especially in the boys' game that is advertising and communications, you know, I think I would have been, you know, not more successful, because I'm happy with where I'm at now, but I think that, you know, I would have definitely not let as many things get to me as I had.
Hayley, the final question that I've got for you is, what's this whole podcast experience taught you about yourself?
I think that it is really important to build relationships. I think, you know, this podcast experience wouldn't have happened if I, you know, hadn't have touched base with you guys and said, I want to be involved and I want to speak to you, you know, about my own journey. And I think that about putting yourself out there and taking those risks, you could have very easily turned around and been like, we don't want you, thanks very much. But I think that, putting myself out there and being able to go, you know, if you want some help, if you want some advice or anything like that, I'm here. And I think, you know, I pride myself on people and relationships in my business and personally. And I think that, you know, being able to build that relationship with you guys is really important to me. And it's something that I think that will last long beyond this podcast. So that's what it's kind of taught me.
Oh, I love that.
It's a great one.
Yeah.
Look,
That's the
I
best
think-
time we've had yet, I reckon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll come back and I'll try and top it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good place to sort of end this episode. Hayley, thank you so much for coming on and sharing, everything from working in advertising to your weight loss journey to how you deal with the haters on social media. You've got such a compelling story to sort of sit and listen to. And again, thank you for reaching out and highlighting the fact that you did reach out to us to be on this podcast. It's something that I say at the end of every episode is if you want to be a part of this, open up, ask Kels and myself. We're happy to have anyone on. We'll discuss anything. And no story is too small. If you just think you can only talk for 15 minutes, cool. That's fine. We can have a chat about that. But we're all about here, all about talking about mental health on here on Line and Length. And, that's what we're about. And we're looking forward to hearing more from you, Hayley.
You guys are doing an amazing job and you should be really proud of everything that you've set up. I think that this conversation needs to happen and it needs to continue to happen and it needs to be the next big thing because, a conversation can save a life. And I think that all people need to do is keep talking. I'm really good at it, but you guys are helping those that aren't as good as it do it well.
Thanks for your honesty, Hayley. I think that's been the best part from me. It's just the honesty that you've shown, the vulnerability of. It's just so good to see. That's what we're all about here.
Oh, thanks, guys.
All right. That's it from us here. This is Your Line and Length. We look forward to hearing you all next week.
This episode of This Is Your Line and Length was brought to you by Picker Financial Solutions. Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial well-being. This includes restructuring your finances, purchasing your first home, or purchasing an investment property. To reach out to Picker Financial Solutions, see the links in this episode's notes. If this podcast has made you realize that you or a friend would benefit from having a chat, please don't hesitate to reach out to experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. In the meantime, take care, look after your lid, and look forward to the next episode of This Is Your Line and Length.